Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 4. Now that our main issues are under control, we can at last start focusing on adding new production chains into the mix. This will include water desalination, which we will need to start supplying the town residents with drinking water, and we will also set up a system which will deal with food wastage, by composting crops we overproduce, turning them into precious fuel gas, as well as compost. For now, we will just store them, and find some use for them at a later date. We will also manage to sort out our population health issues by growing vegetables, and by giving them that aforementioned clean water supply. Let's start by adding another district for the settlement. We are almost full, and still need more people to work in our industries. This guy picked up some iron ore, but now doesn't know what to do with it. Let's just allow it to move it to one of the furnaces. I suppose it tried to move it to the smelting storage, but the conveyor belts did it before he could finish the job. So many nodes to explore, so little time. Doesn't really matter, we can just go in any random direction this early on. Now, I did discover a small flaw in our diesel setup after the last recording. I accidentally hooked the second distiller to the rubber maker's input line, instead of the main pipe going to the storage. Now it should work as intended. Alright, we have room for another farm. This time, we need to grow vegetables. And the best thing is, that once we start supplying it to our people, their overall food consumption will split between the two products. This means that by introducing some greens, they will only eat half as many potatoes as they did before. We only really needed one more farm, so I just let the tree harvester finish the trees that are still in the way, and then sent it to the other side of the island to make room for other things. And new things are happening again. This time, we managed to unlock the burners, which we can use to deal with our garbage, instead of just piling it up in some random location. Now that we have a place to put it, we can start digging up the waste we dumped, and stick it into the fire. We just needed a mining tower, and another excavator to do it. In the meantime, our ship managed to find an abandoned cargo vessel. Once we repair it, it will join our fleet, and we can use it to move cargo from different resource nodes to our island. The first one of those will be oil, but that will be for another episode. Alright, time to get rid of this unseemly pile of garbage. We are still suffering from diseases in the settlement. With the incoming veggies, that shouldn't be an issue for long. We still need to add a second food market to the town though, so it can distribute them once the first harvest arrives. And the ship just found the first oil rig. It will need some repairs to become functional, but it will be well worth the investment. Here, I decided to start leveling a bigger area around the shoreline. We have a couple places where we have some limestone sticking through the ground, so we could take some time to get rid of them. Nice, we have the next level of power generation unlocked. This means we can start playing with steam turbines at last. For now, I will only set up a very rudimentary power plant. We still don't have low pressure turbines, or even the cooling towers to recapture some of the water we use, so don't get too attached to the things we build here. First, we need a water boiler. This takes in water and coal, and outputs high pressure steam. That's what will be used to create mechanical energy in the steam turbines. One boiler can create enough steam for 2 of these turbines. Normally, I would place them in series, but as I've said, this is a temporary setup, so I don't build for things to last. Later on, we will be able to pump the low pressure steam into another set of turbines that can make use of it, but right now, we will simply vent it into the air. Now, the turbines don't generate power by themselves, they only create kinetic energy in the form of rotating a central power shaft. To make electricity, we need these generators, which take that energy from the shaft, and turn it into power we can use. And as I've said, the boiler can create enough steam for 2 turbines, so we can double this power shaft chain. I was really tempted to build a conveyor belt to that coal storage, but as I've said, this is temporary. We can do it for the proper power plants. The only thing left is the water supply. Thankfully, we have a convenient groundwater reservoir nearby we can use. And just in time, we managed to unlock mechanical power storage. We can build flywheels to store some of the kinetic energy from the turbines, which means they don't need to run 24/7. Unfortunately, I didn't leave enough space for 2. No matter. We can just set the second turbine for the power saving mode, and let the first one run continuously. Well, since the limestone storages are all completely full around the island, it will take some time to deal with the ones we dig up around the shoreline. I was really tempted to just dump it into the sea. We have a lot of it around the place, so we could justify using it for terraforming for a little bit. Anyways, we had the room cleared out for the second veggie farm. We need both to fully satisfy the demand, so we couldn't get away with just one. Vegetable farms aren't quite as efficient as the potato ones. We might as well upgrade the Tier 2 construction factories. In fact, we will end up building 2 more later in the episode. We can also hook them up to their output warehouse, so trucks don't need to do it for them. And we just managed to unlock basic desalination. Since we need to supply the town with drinking water anyways, we might as well build that right now. First, we need a water facility for the town. It takes in water, and outputs wastewater. Sadly, we cannot mirror it for some reason. Would have been a bit more organized if we could have the input and output ports switch places. Anyways, the wastewater will simply go into the sea. We are not at the point where we can clean it up, so we gotta do what we gotta do. As for the water, first we need a seawater pump. This will do what it says on the tin, pumps up seawater to be used. It will go into one of these. We used them to distill diesel before. Now, they will be used to desalinate the seawater by boiling it, and then condensing the water out. We are still left with some concentrated brine, basically incredibly salty water, which we can simply dump back into the sea, since we have no use for it at the moment. The coal will go in the middle, and we will use belts to feed it into the distillers. The exhaust will go into the air as usual. And as I've said, the brine will go right back into the sea with a regular liquid dump pipe. All that's left is to deal with the actual water. I think it would make sense to have some of it stored up, so we have a bit of a buffer in case something happens. Wait, that's not good. That pipe would have blocked access to the coal storage. If we build it closer, then the trucks will be able to reach over it to drop off the fuel. No need to be fancy, just build the pipes next to each other. We can worry about stacking them once we get to the proper oil refinery setup. That will need some pipe acrobatics. This one, not so much. There. Trucks can fit under the pipes if necessary, and the town will get nice clean drinking water. We just need to sort out the construction materials needed to finish the rest of the buildings. And it seems we managed to research settlement power in the meantime. That's just a transformer building, but it will be a constant drain on our power. At least it keeps people happy. We managed to dig up what we could around the shoreline. I suppose we could keep digging. The developers added some small hills around the maps, I suppose to help with the early brick production, but honestly, I like what someone said about the bricks on Reddit. Adding bricks was a solution looking for a problem. I only really bother with them because of the tutorial objectives, and as a small resource sink for dirt. I guess the power generator should be set to priority 1. It's kind of important to keep running 24/7. And the lack of coal in the mining storages tells me that we should add another excavator to the tower. I see no reason not to build 2 more Tier 2 construction factories. Their slow output is what's holding up the current projects at the moment. Well, I was expecting this. We just encountered a pirate ship. It's pretty small, but without weapons, we cannot do much about it. So the ship automatically retreated. We just need to look for stuff in other directions for now. The next technology we unlocked was biofuel. We will set that up later in the episode, even though it is pretty useless at the moment. That garbage dump is slowly being burned. We should be able to get rid of it completely, maybe early on in the next episode. And since we are getting pretty close to the point where we can start thinking about importing oil, maybe we should move the trading dock. Between recordings, I managed to find a small spot where it can be built. The shoreline on this map is pretty inhospitable at the start. And once again, we are short on workers. Time to expand the settlement. Looking at our statistics, it seems the vegetables and the water made a big difference. The average health of the population jumped from 10 to 28. But that won't last forever. Soon the pollution will start getting much worse, and we will need to start worrying about healthcare. To keep progressing with the tutorials, we need to build a captain's office. This is a building where we can set certain edicts for the island. They can be either for the settlement, or for the industries. And that just unlocked a lot of other tutorial missions, which we managed to finish well in advance. It pays to think ahead. The next big objective is the advanced diesel. That's the next step up in terms of complexity. I suppose we could rearrange the research queue a little, just so we can knock out the advanced diesel and the cargo ports next. We could also add the cooling towers. Those can be really helpful for the power plants, since they can recycle some of the steam, and cut our water usage in half in those facilities. How about we play around with the biofuel tech a little in the meantime? We could use it to deal with the overproduction of the foods, and turn the excess into diesel. What I build now will be flawed, and I will rebuild it later, but it's a good place to introduce you to some new mechanics we haven't used before. For starters, we need 2 storages. One for potatoes, and one for veggies. And the new mechanic I would like to show you is the transport balancers. They can merge or split conveyor belts and pipes, and more crucially, they can prioritize certain inputs and outputs over others, creating a nice little system for production overflows. Take the one we placed between the storage and the food distributor. It has 2 lines right now. Okay, make that 3. The one coming from the storage is an input, the other 2 are the outputs. Once we are done with adding belts to it, we can simply click on it, and choose which of the attached lines are prioritized over others. Basically, we can tell it to receive potatoes from the drop-off storage, and send it all toward the town food market building. And once that's completely full, then it can start sending the remaining potatoes toward the aerobic digester, composting the things we don't need, turning them into compost and fuel gas. Now, I did say that this setup is flawed. That is only half correct. Theoretically speaking, this would work perfectly fine. But personally, I would like to include another set of storages, so we can expand the amount stored, expanding the food buffer in the town. And to be a bit more space efficient, I also moved the waste collection building to the other side of the settlement, so we can move the vegetable market next to the potato one. Now, we just need to set the priorities. It's a very intuitive system. The building schematic will appear on the info window, and it will mimic the camera position, making it extremely easy to tell which connections are which. We just click on the ones we want to prioritize, and it's done. That's the sorting before the digester done. We still need to deal with the output. The compost is easy enough, it just goes into a simple aggregate storage. The fuel gas, that's a bit more interesting. The compost can be dumped anywhere, so that's easy to handle, but fuel gas, to get rid of the excess, we need a special building called a flare. It's extremely convenient that we just managed to research it. Complete coincidence. Anyways, we don't want to burn it all if we can help it. We only want to get rid of the excess. So, we use a balancer again. All the produced fuel gas will be directed toward the storage tank, and once that's full, then we can start moving the rest toward the flare, burning off the extra production. As I've said before, I'm not completely satisfied with this setup. It does the job just fine, but I would prefer to include some extra storage for the town itself if I can. And look, the power station is done. To take advantage of that mechanical power storage, which is called a flywheel, we need to tell the relevant turbine to go into auto balance mode. This will ensure that it only turns on if the amount of mechanical energy stored up in the power shaft is above a certain threshold. Basically, it's a colossal wheel, meant to be as heavy as possible. It stores a lot of momentum, acting as an energy storage device. Of course, it doesn't do it forever, it's not a frictionless system, but it does allow the turbine to switch off every once in a while, saving some coal in the process. In the meantime, we managed to research the advanced diesel refinery. To really make use of it, we will need to get the cargo ports too, which are already being researched. Preferably, I would like to place the first one here, where we have a lot of room for the refinery. But the coastline isn't really ready yet. We could speed up the process by also allowing dirt and maybe limestone dumping, but honestly, I would prefer to keep it stone and slag if I can help it. Glad to see the town water tank completely full. The desalination setup is working as needed. We might as well expand the shoreline mining area. We have a lot of dirt left to dig up. Nice, the ship just explored a node with some wheat seeds in it. Once we do the research, we can start planting those too. They will be perfect for making bread, and they can be used as animal feed later. And we also finished researching the cargo dock. Sadly, the coastline isn't quite ready yet. Where we could place it is too close to the existing shipyard. Not exactly ideal. To help out the terraforming a little, I decided to dig deeper into the coal mine. I was hoping we could dig up some stone if we go down more. We could also carefully designate some more mining deeper into the deposit. Let's just make sure we don't go too close to the edge, especially the sandy area. We don't want any unwanted dirt or sand falling into the mining pit. Maybe that's a bit too close. Look at the power plant. The flywheel is spinning wildly, but the turbine attached to it isn't. It got spun up, and is now coasting along, and if necessary, all that kinetic energy will be given to the generators. Anyways, since we started digging deeper into the coal mine, I decided to do something similar for the iron mine too. But, instead of digging all the way below sea level, we will only dig until we reach level 1. That's the lowest we can go without flooding. In case you didn't notice yet, the iron deposit ends at the sea. If we want to dig it all up, we will need to create some kind of barrier to prevent flooding the mining pit. So, we can dig all the way through the mountain, reach the shore, and start dumping stuff into the sea, creating a sort of barrier, preventing the seawater going into the pit. I suppose we could prepare the maintenance setup for the next stage. When we upgrade the depots, then they will start demanding a lot more materials. If we double the production of the input goods, then we can coast on that for a while. Even this won't be enough to satisfy the upgraded depots, but once the factories are upgraded to the next level, then they should be okay. We are pretty close to the maximum number of people in the settlement. I suppose we can turn off the beacon now. I also turned off dumping into this part of the shore. I want to finish the main section ASAP. And to be honest, I am pretty tempted to start sacrificing some real estate for a stone quarry. That would speed up the process considerably. That would require some acrobatics with the retaining walls, which we are yet to use in this series, so I am more and more convinced that we should do it. And this is where I decided to rebuild this composting setup. I really wanted to include those extra storages. From this point on, it will be pretty much the same that we did before, we just prioritize sending the food toward the storages, instead of directly into the food markets. I think it makes more sense to have the storages swap places, so the belts can be routed a bit more sensibly. Okay, these leftover stuffs are in the way. Wait, we can use Unity to move the goods to the shipyard now? That makes things a bit easier. I wonder, what can we do with the compost at this stage of the game? Well, not much. We can just dump it. Later we can use it to make dirt and fertilizer, but as far as I remember, dumping it also turns it into dirt, so it's just good for fertilizer, but without the necessary research. We can just dump it right now. Oh yeah. Did I mention that the game has an extremely helpful recipe book? You can look up whatever you want, and it will tell you all the industrial processes it's used in, both where it's made, and where it's used. It will become extremely helpful as we get deeper into the game. Anyways, this is what we ended up with. The trucks will drop the food off at the side storages, and the balancers will sort them. Quite handy. We still need to reset some of the buildings we used in the early game. They are still confusing some of the trucks. Well, I don't think we got much stone out of this deeper dig. Apart from the occasional dirt falling in from the top, it's pretty much pure coal at this point. We might as well upgrade our farms at this point. We have the materials. Sadly, it won't increase our yields in the immediate terms. For that, we will need to give them a proper water supply. And farms require a lot of water. Before the update, upgrading to irrigated farms did give a small boost to the yields, but not anymore. To get better results, we will need to start using crop rotation to let the fields rest between plantings. And look, we just finished steel production. That is something that we will need to make the next tier of construction parts. Although we are very close to the end of the episode, I decided to do this real quick. Basically, the furnaces will give us molten iron, as per usual. But then, That stuff will be poured into an oxygen furnace, which turns it into molten steel. Don't ask me where the carbon content comes from. That oxygen furnace only needs the molten iron and oxygen. Maybe it's left over from the iron melting process. Who knows? I'm not going to argue. This does cut the overall yield in half, however. So, 24 units of molten iron will turn into 12 units of molten steel. And that steel will be poured into a cooled caster building. Same as a regular caster, but with an input for water for extra cooling. I guess it's needed to temper the steel correctly. I'm not an expert, but it makes sense from what little I know about such things. Okay, we just need to sort out the oxygen. And that is pretty easy. We have a very handy air separator building now. It just sucks in perfectly normal air from outside, and separates the O2 and the nitrogen. But, it does this continuously, so we need to vent the excess gases back out, so we don't clog up the system. For that, the Tier 2 smokestack will come in handy. And, we can also use some pipe balancers, so we only get rid of the produced gases that we don't need. Later on, we will need to make use of the other gas to make liquid nitrogen canisters for the Tier 3 research. That's why I gave the N2 output its own balancer setup, in case you were wondering. And, since we are producing 36 units of oxygen, and we are only using 18 units in one steel smelting line, we can pretty much double the whole thing, except for the air separator. And yes, my alarm clock was getting really loud at this point, but I was not going to leave this thing half finished if I could help it. Okay, just need 2 more rain harvesters for the second cooled caster. We can also place the warehouse for the finished steel plates. And with all that done, we can unpause everything. Which is pretty much all we have time for in this episode. In the next one, I suspect we will make use of that steel, and start making the next level of construction parts. And I think I managed to talk myself into starting that stone quarry I talked about. We will need to select a place that we can sacrifice for it, and then start digging down aggressively. There is a layer of dirt we need to get through before we reach the rocky layers, but it will be well worth it. The speed of our terraforming efforts will be much faster, since we are relying on slag at the moment, pretty much exclusively. I really want to get to that oil refinery as fast as possible. I mean, I could start building it right now, since we have oil on the island, but to be honest, I would prefer to know where the cargo dock will be situated before I get started. I would like this thing to look like a cohesive whole if I can, and for that, we need to know the placement of everything in advance. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel just might motivate me to make more. If you are more in the donating mood, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description, where you can buy me a glass of water. I don't really drink coffee. Thank you for your support, and until next time, I will see you later.